The Ford Motor Company has been making history for over 115 years since the introduction of the Model T in 1908. This 1925 example that I'm sitting in here in the Audrain Automobile Museum is one of the cars that helped Ford get to 15 million of these cars before the end of production in 1927. The Ford Motor Company is still making history, and we're really grateful to our friends at the Ford Motor Company to allow us to get some of the latest, most desirable models early in the production cycle so that we can share them with you and continue our mission to preserve, celebrate, and share automotive history. Let's take a look at two of Ford's newest products and see if Henry would have approved.
If you love classic cars, then Donald loves you.
This feels as comfortable in this lightly off-road setting as it did on the roads themselves. This is an incredible testament to what this vehicle can do. The vehicle I'm driving today is a 2021 Ford Bronco First Edition. And it's a really interesting thing that when a nameplate that's been very important to the history of a car manufacturer is brought back, there's always great expectation that follows that. Is the nameplate being brought back just to trade on the nostalgia of the old vehicle, to connect with the people that had them when they were new, with perhaps the spirit of whatever that vehicle was? And if that's the case, then how will it connect with new buyers, people who weren't around when the first one came out? That's an interesting question about the Bronco. There's certainly little doubt that the name Bronco means a lot to Ford fans, certainly, and I've long been a Ford guy from the time I was a little kid. I always liked Fords, and I've owned a lot of Fords over the years, SUVs and automobiles alike. And the Bronco, obviously, when it was first introduced back in 1966, was very much in the family of the Mustang. In fact, Mustang, Bronco, see the connection. And the fact that both the original Mustang and the original Bronco were designed by one of the legends of Ford design, Donald Fry. And the Bronco also has, as the Mustang as well, but especially the Bronco, another really interesting place in automotive design and culture, in that one of the chief designers of the original Bronco was McKinley Thompson, who was the first black car designer in Detroit. And his part in that has been very well documented, and he was quite well known for that and some other wonderful concept cars that he designed for Ford. And I say this not only because I think I'm very proud of what he accomplished, but creating an iconic shape is something that isn't necessarily the work of a single man or woman for that matter, but something that really captures the spirit of a vehicle. And Fry and Thompson really did that with the original Bronco. I can still remember it quite well from when it was first introduced when I was a kid, and just the clean feeling that it had. And there's a whole group of vehicles that today most young people would refer to as cars, which of course were very much trucks and very much utility vehicles. The International Scout, the Jeep Wrangler. And when you had a vehicle like the Bronco that was utilitarian and yet had this spirit of the 1960s, like the Mustang, it really meant something to the marketplace and to the consumers. So the Bronco went through many generations, as with the case with most American vehicles, getting bigger and bigger and heavier, until it finally went away and was replaced by the Expedition, because the taste for vehicles like this had turned to four doors. And so it's interesting that when you think about the fact that the original Bronco, through all its iterations, became the Expedition, and you would think that from the original Bronco it might have become the Explorer instead, but again, bigger, always seems to be better for most cases in Detroit. But back to the Bronco. When Ford announced that they were reintroducing the Bronco after a great length of time, there was great anticipation. What would this new Bronco be? And would it be like the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth generations? Or would it be something more akin to the original Bronco? So when the first sort of sneak images came out of the new Bronco, it was quite clear that Ford was clearly aiming to get the spirit of the original 1966 Bronco into the new vehicle. And to that end, this model, the short wheelbase two-door, and especially in the special edition model, is probably closest to that original feeling of the car. This is my first drive actually in the short wheelbase two-door version. I'd driven the four-door before, and it's a very, very nice vehicle. As a matter of fact, it reminds me a lot of my 1991 Ford Explorer that I had and loved for 260,000 miles. And I was eager to see what the two-door would be like, and the character is remarkably different, as you would not be surprised to see with the sharply smaller, 15 inches shorter wheelbase that this vehicle has. And I keep pausing before I say vehicle because I want to say the C word, I want to say car. And part of that is the fact that unlike the original Bronco, which was very much a truck, it reminded you of that at all turns, this current Bronco is very much a modern crossover. It's big, it's tall, it's got great presence, but it's also smooth as a 1966 LTD might have been, but with the power of a 6.6 Thunderbird. So, this is a really interesting combination of features to be able to ride in this comfort. And it's an interesting thing as well because this is very much a sort of a unit. I've spoken before in other videos about how a vehicle works to support the occupants in many ways. One is obviously the suspension itself, then there are the tires, and then there are the seats. And it's very interesting, the combination here in this Bronco provided driving experience which is slightly unexpected based on just looking at the exterior. You expect somehow that it's going to be harsh. It's not. You then expect, okay, well, it's going to be too soft, but it's not. This is a very capable off-road vehicle. We're not taking it off-road, however. It's a great example of the fact that there are interesting vehicles that can be driven all year round. We don't have to save fun for the summertime. And it's interesting to see exactly how much of the character of a first-generation Bronco they were able to bake in to this new Bronco. I find myself leaning into the corner as if I'm driving a sports car, which I am not. This is not a sports car. But it is something that gives you confidence in a way that is very, very reassuring. The only noise in the car is from the roof. It's a removable roof panel, so you're getting some wind noise, which frankly helps, for me, the feeling of this vehicle, because you want to get the impression that you are on the road and of the road, not sort of floating above it somehow in something cushy and luxurious. But it certainly is comfortable. I like the way, too, that it's got still a manual seat adjustment because, this is a truck. And so, I don't want 6-way power seats and all that. Now, of course, on a nice cold New England damp day, it's nice to have seat heaters. So that's for sure. And it's also good to have the reassuring feel of the handling and the brakes, because this V6 engine, which is 315 horsepower, is certainly very capable. And comparing it to the original Bronco, where the hot power plant was the venerable and respected 289 that put out 200 horsepower, admittedly in a much, much lighter vehicle. It's it's interesting to see how that has translated into the modern Bronco. Just checking out the modes here. We're in two-wheel drive high right now, which is where we're going to stay for all of this. We've gone to four-wheel drive high. You can actually feel the difference in the road holding. And when you're in the wet, it's probably a good idea to take advantage of that. This is a vehicle that, you know, you wouldn't mind taking on a very long trip because it's certainly got the comfort. And I think that you can speak very highly as well for the build quality of this car. There I did it again. Maybe it's just a casualty of the times. It'll be interesting to see. We're going to do a semi-off-road excursion up here, and we'll be able to see how the suspension feels when I'm climbing over uneven surfaces. Let's check that out. This feels as comfortable in this lightly off-road setting as it did on the roads themselves. This is an incredible testament to what this vehicle can do. This is the kind of vehicle that you could take easily on any sort of a camping trip and not be afraid at all of what you're going to run into. Whether you're going to take this on an overland over boulders is another thing entirely. But I don't think that that's what this is intended for, nor is it the way it's going to be used. But the fact that you can do this is a great testament to what the Ford engineers have created with this vehicle. So having sampled one part of Ford's modern truck adventure, now it's time to sample another, rather different, but also really an interesting reinterpretation of something that Ford's quite famous for. So if the Bronco, the new Bronco, was a new vehicle in the spirit of a beloved old one, what I'm driving right now is nothing less than a complete revolution. An old one that's still with us, that's completely new. I'm driving a 2022 Ford F-150 Lightning. Now, there's a couple of things. First of all, there are many who are watching this video who have been born since the 42 years that the Ford F-150 has been the best-selling vehicle in the United States. The F-Series pickup truck has been the best-selling pickup truck since the 1970s, but in the 1980s it became the best-selling vehicle. Now, since that time, and it's a remarkably short one, thinking about, well, 42 years is short for me, the pickup truck completed its transformation from a completely utility vehicle to the family car. There are millions of people for whom a pickup truck, and many of those, an F-150, is the primary vehicle of use in a household. And as such, obviously, trucks have changed a lot since I was a kid. And to see this next iteration of where it goes with the electrification of much, I say much, not all, of the automotive fleet is very interesting. First and foremost, I can say without a doubt, driving this is really, really, really weird because it feels just like an F-150. As a matter of fact, maybe it's because I'm used to these vehicles and my mind has filled in the sound of an engine, because it doesn't feel any different than an F-150. It's got that heft, it's got the solidity that I expect from an F-150, from a new F-150, but it is quiet. So I'm thinking, well, it's just because I'm driving slowly. But if I put my foot in it, it goes like very few, if any, F-150s ever have. And that's with 426 horsepower from these dual electric motors and with a 300-mile range. It's really quite impressive. I recently drove in Europe an electric vehicle, an SUV, from a major manufacturer, and I was less than impressed with the range and the way it delivered that range. I had constant range anxiety, which I have none of in this. This is a vehicle that I could take comfortably on a reasonably long trip. Now, it's also quite interesting because this is a pickup truck. It's a quad cab pickup truck, 4 doors, full 5-seater vehicle with a big bed out and back. This is the F-150 Lightning Lariat edition, but with a couple of extras. It's got the extended battery and a couple of bits of trim that normally aren't found on Lariats, but are found on this one. And the level of development and refinement in pickup trucks today never ceases to amaze me, and this is a great example of that. It's no wonder that these have become the family sedan, because it has all of the comfort and utility of the family sedans that we grew up with in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, with the added utility of the pickup truck. Now, it also is quite interesting in that it has the large display screen that you expect in modern vehicles, especially electric vehicles. It's absolutely huge. It covers the center of the dashboard. It leaves the display in front of the driver, which is changeable, rather empty. It's sort of sad looking in a way. It's got the speedometer and the range, and that's it. It tells you exactly what you need to know. But it's amazing what this vehicle will do. And perhaps it's also telling you that you don't need to worry about all the things that you used to worry about when you're driving, because this just delivers what it has to in such an easy, unfussy way. Now, you do have a choice of modes. We've got drive modes from normal, sport, off-road, and tow and haul. The other thing about this, it's got the capacity to tow 7,700 pounds, which is quite impressive. And when it's not doing that, of course, it can power your house. But let's get to that in a second. But I'm going to select sport mode. That is interesting. That is very, very interesting. This is a vehicle of many characters. And I think that's also typical of the Ford truck product of today, is that it gives you those options to use the vehicle in various ways. And, you know, not that long ago, the idea of a sport mode in a truck would have seemed laughably silly. But, you know, with a truck with this kind of performance, and with the chassis this has, I'm very impressed with the chassis of this F-150 as well. And it's got that regenerative braking, so that when you lift off of the throttle, you immediately start to slow down as the battery begins to recharge itself. And even with that little bit of aggressive driving that I just did there for just a very brief moment, it hasn't really dented the range, because the range is prodigious. And that happened in a way that did not happen in that other vehicle that I was describing just a moment ago, that I was driving over in Italy, which is not, by the way, an Italian vehicle. But it is really interesting. I don't know if a wet winter road, it's not that wet, a damp winter road is the place to really explore the dynamic capabilities of the sport setting. But it's good to know that it's there, and it's also very interesting to see that you can really feel the difference. The other thing that really impresses is the fact that when you're in a vehicle like this and you've got this space, this performance, the capability in terms of towing, a very responsive chassis, you do forget at times that you're driving a vehicle that was initially designed for pure utility. And that versatility, I think, is really what sets a modern truck apart. And I think that this F-150 really does it quite well, because it doesn't feel like a trick electric vehicle. It feels like a Ford F-150 truck that happens to be powered by electric motors. And that's a really good thing. It's heartening to see what's coming out of Ford, what's coming out of some of the other manufacturers today that can deliver this kind of, I dare say, satisfaction behind the wheel, which you wouldn't think that you would apply to a vehicle of utility. But the world has moved on so quickly and in so many ways. It's really quite interesting to experience. It's very interesting to me as we go into this new age of alternative propulsion that the electric vehicle will certainly be a large part of that. I think we will see a mix. It'll be very interesting to see how Ford does that, having split their business into an internal combustion side and an electric side, so they can develop parallel tracks vehicles to suit various needs and requirements. So it'll be very interesting to see what they develop and how they come along. But I can certainly say that this F-150 Lightning is very, very impressive. And I didn't even have to power my house with it. Not bad.